I'm going to give you a charge for you guys to break up into groups to talk about how to proceed with both the HOPS ideas for renovating or expanding, and more importantly, or as importantly, the sort of universal ideas about best practices and what these kind of spaces mean. And so, so these are my charges to the different teams. And do you? I know that the moderators have been identified. Does everyone have in their packets the Charrette teams that they've been assigned to? Yes. Okay. So, first question is for many of you: what is this charrette? What is a charrette? And so I just thought I would pull out a wiki definition for you so that we could go over it. And it applies, in this case, much more to direct design work as opposed to the kind of best practices idea that we're trying to get at today, or more general ideas. But the word charrette may refer to any collaborative session in which a group of designers drafts a solution to a design problem. While the structure of charrette varies depending on the design problem and the individuals in the group, charrettes often take place in multiple sessions in which groups divide into subgroups, which we will be doing today. Each subgroup then presents its work back to the full group as material for future dialogue. And that future dialogue is what we're hoping will turn into a future dialogue about the facility of an arts center in general, as well as the specific site-specific conditions here at the Hopkins. These kinds of charrettes serve as ways of quickly generating design solutions, or in this case, programming solutions or further questions, while integrating the aptitudes and interests of a diverse group of people. So what's the question we're asking here in a large sense? As Jeff just said, he's recognized that the facility here has a number of needs that are specific to them. But like many other facilities around the country, they're at a point of thinking about what comes next with their facility. And so in general, what we're looking at is how do we build new art centers that will serve the next 50 years in the way the HOP has served the last 50 years of creative exploration and provide compelling platforms for presentation, teaching, research, and audience engagement. And so like the panels that we've had today, we've divided the Charrette teams up into looking at those elements of the space that we've talked about. And I was talking with, I think it was Josh during the break. He asked the question about, or encouraged people not to think about teaching space as only being a separate space, but really teaching space could be the performance space or could be the research and development space. I think we all recognize that there's a conceit here by separating out these spaces into individual program areas, that there could and very well might be an overlap between them. But what we'd like you to look at is if you broke that out into an individual space, say for performance and presentation, or say for teaching and learning, what would be the optimum thing to energize and support the activities that go on in that space in specific? So for each of the groups, we're asking a series of questions that we ask you to consider together. And we'd like you to consider both the sort of universal condition in general, and then the site-specific condition at the Hopkins. So our first question is, how does the space considered by your team differ from the spaces being considered by the other teams? And we've got these program charges are being distributed to each of the teams as well in a written format. They're in the packets. So what makes this a distinctive space? And consider the nature of the activities or the work to be supported there. This is, well, I'll just go on to the second question. What are the verities, the time-honored elements that should always be present in the space that you're considering? So what do we know about spaces for development of new work that you would always want to have in that space? And the question 3 is, what are the current trends that should affect this type of space or the nature of this type of space? So if you can think about the trends that you see in the way you teach or the way you collaborate with others, what would those trends be that might affect the way that your specific space would be would be structured or the way that support would be added in that space. What would the physical manifestations of that space be to optimize those activities or the work that's supported there? That's question 4. And if those physical characteristics were in place, what would be the ideal outcome? Like, in other words, what is the goal that you would want to achieve by changing the way we think about the space or developing the space in the way in which you think would best serve the goals and program of that space? And finally, are there other questions that should be asked or issues to be addressed regarding the nature of the spaces that your team's considering? So it's a big charge, and we're hoping that these are 2 additional questions. So the 4 teams that follow pretty much the structure of what we looked at today, in addition to them, there's a 5th team, which we're calling Reanimating Public Space. And that's looking at, in specific with the Hopkins, how would we reanimate public space that is in this center or outside the center to make it into a much more active environment for the kinds of events that reflect the cultural initiatives that are happening on campus, reflect the way students use them, make them seem for the town and the campus, all these kinds of things that might reanimate public space. So the 5th team is looking at that question kind of separately from the specific uses of the other spaces that we've talked about. These are 2 additional questions that we posed to that 5th team, which is, what examples would you cite of existing public spaces that have been innovatively reimagined or reanimated? And what are the characteristics of art center environments which should set them apart from other kinds of environments? And these are both very general questions and maybe not so specific to the Hopkins, but would be addressed sort of more generally. Again, we'd like you to think about them in both universal and site-specific or Hopkins-specific ways. And we talked about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be this way, but we thought maybe if we could use a session before dinner to talk about the general or universal, have dinner, and then begin to come back and revisit the Hopkins, actual spaces in the Hopkins, so that you have kind of a general framework of what these spaces are intended to do, and then come back and apply that thinking to the Hop. That might be one way to proceed. And I don't know that that's a rule, but it was more a suggestion, I guess. Each team will have a moderator, a team reporter, and 2 recorders, one of whom is recording on a laptop and one who is a member of the staff or faculty here who has the ability to draw diagrams or sketch or take notes on an easel. So we'll have both a laptop recording and a large white paper recording of what you guys are discussing. Jerry, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the actual recording and reporting out process. But the moderator is, as you guys who are moderators know, are sort of in charge of or charged with the responsibility of leading the group in the discussion, making sure that you get to each of the questions and that they're considered from multiple perspectives. Symposium goals we've talked a little bit about before, but we're hoping that out of this that there might come a white paper that addresses the general or more universal aspects of performing arts centers and where they are, or art centers and where they are now, and that there might also be a sort of a set of guidelines or recommendations that could help guide the Hop in their future thinking about the master planning for their facility. This is the plan that you looked at before, and I'm just going to show, after we're done here and after Jerry talks, we're going to all break into groups and take a tour of the Hopkins, so everyone will get familiar with the spaces that we're talking about. But I thought I'd just talk about a few things here and show you some of the images of what were the spaces that Jeff referred to before. So this is top of the Hop up here, right? This is the green here. All of this area to the north is pretty much campus. And this, Lebanon Street and Main Street, kind of are the cusp of town. Am I correct in saying that? So really, the Hopkins occupies this transitional threshold between town down here and campus up here. And so when Jeff was pointing out the social spaces or outdoor spaces that might be involved, you know, we're talking about the top of the Hop and the adjacent rooftop spaces that are up here. These are the corridors that lead down to the art studios. And you know, one thing that we should say is that this is not just a performing arts center or an arts center. It also contains a big element of student center aspects to it too. So when you walked down here, you walk by mailboxes and a cafe. It's a center for students who are not necessarily involved in the activities of the building, but it's also a social center. And I don't know, Jeff, where are you? Yeah, I don't know the extent to which that will continue to be the case, but it's one of the features of the building that I think has been very important to the student life here, is the fact that for social reasons they come here as well as for educational and artistic reasons. So this is the parking lot that Jeff was talking about that we'll see, and I have some pictures of. And then this whole edge here is what we're talking about as a potential expansion area also, or potential new entry. This area in here is where the art studios that will be vacated are. Is that correct, Jeff? And this is where the current gallery space is up here below, and where they have ongoing exhibitions. So we've seen this already. This is the exterior. This is the top of the Hop, and this is the lobby for the Moore Theater down below. Really, they kind of make one space. And to the right of that, then there's this outdoor plaza, which is a potential space for, we don't know what yet, but it's a potential space. Linked to that, behind that, is the Alumni Hall, which is their large space that Jeff indicated was going to be converted potentially into a rehearsal flexible venue. And that's this space right here, correct? Yes? In back, that runs along here. This is the rooftop terrace. There's also Sunken Gardens down here, which are great social spaces potentially. And this is the alumni room, which is something that we've talked about as being a potential, or faculty room rather, talking about being a potential site for some other programmatic element as well. This is the lower level of the lobby at the front of the, going into the Moore Theater. This is the top of the Hop, complete with the ski chalet fireplace, which looks ridiculous in the summertime, but I don't know. Is it a very important element in the wintertime? Is it used? Not very often. Probably when it was initiated, it was. So, but great view across here, directly across the green to the rest of the campus. It's a really important connection. This is the back of the theater. So this is the back of the art studios that are going to be vacated. This is a really interesting space here to me, actually. And this is the parking lot that is, you know, a potential for expansion next to the wall of the theater that we're in now. That's the stage house at the Moore Theater up there. That's the side of the studios. You can see these studios have these big north-facing skylights over them. It's a very nice space. This is the Mui Mall rear entrance to the theater back here. You know, they could. It's barely room for a swing through drop off, and so this is the sort of the joint or transition between town and the university. And this is that from the other side. This is the back of the space that we're in now, the concert hall. That's the back of the space, and this is the space where the art center will go in. So there is, you've seen in some of the renderings that there's a kind of quad space, plaza space, landscape space that's anticipated between the back of Spalding and the new art center. And then this over here is the Hood Museum. Interiors of some of the, this is the art studios. You can see the light coming down from up in the, you know, up in the skylights up here. These are some of the art studios. Across from the art studios, the cafe, and it's yet to be determined whether the cafe stays or how much cafe stays or where the cafe should be. But as we looked at before, I think that it's important to have these kind of social spaces both for students as well, I would maintain for the public. So this is that hallway that we walked down. This is the stairs up to the Spalding lobby, which is up here. This is the cafe. This was all glass originally, back to the idea of transparency, looking into the art studios. So, 50 years ago, this was built to do many of the same things that people are doing now, which is to open up all the stuff that's going on in the art studios to what's happening in the social part of the campus. That's the Spalding lobby. And we're back to the front of the house. So these are some of the spaces that you're going to be considering. It's been thought that the teaching, learning, maybe laboratory spaces might occupy the vacated art studio spaces. I don't know that we know that that's the case, but that's kind of the direction I think the original master plan looked at. So when we break you into your charrette teams, you're going to be looking at spaces that had previously been thought of as spaces that might occupy your subject area, your team area. But I would encourage you also to begin to think about, as you tour around, maybe that's not the right solution somehow. So what we're going to do now, Jerry's going to talk about the reporting out, then we'll break up into teams, we'll do a tour as in your teams, and then you'll get assigned to the spaces where the charrette will be working. So we have 5 rooms that are set up for the teams to work in that most are adjacent to the spaces that you'll be considering for your subject area. Some are not because they're not air conditioned, so we moved those into air conditioned spaces. And as Jeff said, Jerry and he and I will be walking around during the charrette to visit each of the groups, either individually or together, so we can see what you're doing. Okay?